instances of paranormal phenomena have been reported in this desolate place. Events that may reflect the area's tragic past. Whatever they are, whatever you call them, ghosts, spirits, shades, specters, apparitions, there is not a corner of the world they do not inhabit.
I'm coming through.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Other Dangerous Podcast, where we talk all things paranormal. I'm Ken James, and this is Jason McKittrick.
Hey, folks.
And if it can haunt, howl, or dwell in the dark, we want to talk about it. Guys, we know it's been a while. We've been on a little micro hiatus here.
A little bit.
Life's been a little busy, but we're back. We're back in the same room.
Oh, yeah.
Back to bring you more of the goods. And today, Jay, what are we getting into?
Well, Ken, we're going to be discussing 3 of our favorite picks from possibly our favorite story collection,
I would say,
anthology
yeah.
collection. None other than Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Oh.
Written by Alvin Schwartz and collected by Alvin Schwartz.
Collected, yes.
He edited some of the stories, and then with the legendary illustrations by Stephen Gamble. Legendary. First book was published in 1981, and the trouble started not soon after. If you're familiar with the book, you know that it's been banned from children's libraries at schools for a long time. I honestly don't know why, but then I do know why at the same time.
Right.
I mean, like, you know this book, I'm sure, but if not, the illustrations, man. I mean, the stories are like vanilla as you could possibly get.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them are great, but it's the illustrations that put it over the top.
Yeah, the stories are more of like a tone. It's more of like this, like, you know, just folklore that's like far from the edge. It's not on the edge of anything, but the illustrations just push them to and over the edge of, you know, horror-inducing nightmares.
Yeah, quotes from the American Library Association listed as being the most challenged series of books from the 1990s, which is, you know, had the most controversy surrounding it for kids. Complaints have typically centered on its violence, disturbing subject matter, and potentially unsuitable for young readers, as well as religious concerns. I'm going to go ahead and just disagree with all those.
Yeah, right.
What didn't you get from the cover? Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You know what I mean? It's like, it'd be one thing if it'd be like, you know, oh, Dr. Seuss, whatever, but, you know.
Yeah, see, and the funny thing was, I found these in my library in school. Like, that's where my love affair began with these books. And of course, the audio books that they were there too. And I remember I would check the books out so many times that I was like, what am I doing next? And then I found there was a cassette tape area, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
These are coming with. So I started renting those out from the school library, and I would force my dad with my brothers in the car to listen to it. And, you know, it's just like, I was in such a just joy and just the spooky insanity. And one of the stories that I read today, I'll be doing my best rendition of George Irving's take on one of my favorite stories. And if you ever listen to it, you just know that he is a lunatic and read it like a lunatic, and it's a total lunatic version of the telling. So I will channel my inner lunatic today.
It's all out there, buddy.
Yeah. Well, not like Ryan, but
I told you his ghost hangs over this episode. I found it. I kind of went on a whim. You know, back in the day, remember was it every month you'd get the Troll Books flyer from Scholastic? Troll. I was like, oh, always awesome, because I was a huge bookworm when I was a kid. And I remember seeing the cover. I was like, I have to have this. I remember bringing it home to my mom, and I was like, I need this. And there was a bunch of other. Remember, there was like, If You Want to Scare Yourself, and there was a bunch of other ones that were out there. Kind of like, you know, at this point they were already just biting off of this series.
Yeah.
But I hadn't heard of them before this, so like I got it, and I was just like, this is amazing. And I just read it over and over again. I used to just sit and stare at the pictures, specifically from the haunted house. Yeah. The girl with the sun with like the hollow eyes. I would just be like, what the fuck?
Like, who you're it's almost at a point where it's like, yeah, you know, like the illustrations, like they were, they based off the stories, but in a way it's like, no. Now that you see these pictures, you're like, no, now the stories take on the pictures form. You know what I mean?
Exactly. They're so intertwined that it kind of backfired on them, because back in 2011 they tried to do a re-release of the book, because they're like, listen, what's given us the trouble for this is that it's the illustrations.
Right.
It's like, trouble? What are you talking about? This is awesome. So 2011, they get this illustrator. I think it's Brett Hellquist. I forget what he worked on, because his stuff is silly. It's just totally unsuited for this, and they had him redo all the illustrations, and they're terrible. And they're even made more terrible because the originals, and they're making all this hype. Oh, they're re-releasing it. Oh, they're just going to try to re-release it because they want it to stay on bookshelves. Right. They want people to be able to get these books, and kids, whatever. It comes out. I remember going to the bookstore, Barnes and Noble or whatever it was, and I was just like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, I remember when we saw an article that had basically the compared pictures from each story, and I almost threw my phone. You motherfucker! I almost just threw my phone on the ground. Was like, what? Like what? And I remember it was the one from the haunted house, and it was the ghost girl. And there's a guy holding the candle.
Yeah, the guy who did the illustrations, I think he did it's like the series of Unfortunate Events books, or
cool.
It's on par with the covers of the Harry Potter books.
Right,
it's that sanitized.
Yeah.
It's
super vanilla.
You can't even say vanilla. They're just hey, you know what? The other ones that were awesome do it the exact opposite.
Yeah. Right.
So people were not pleased, and then at that time you couldn't actually get the ones with the original Stephen Gamble illustrations, and then soon after, with people being like, "Fuck is wrong with you people?" They finally put them back out, and then now you can get it readily. They're readily available. You get them no problem. But I still have my original copy somewhere. I keep it on a shelf because I don't want it to get messed up, because it's dog-eared. It was in my backpack and tumbled around. You know what I mean? Yeah. Luckily, I think it was in 2000 I found this. The Scary Stories Treasury. It's all three of them put together. It's kind of, you could still get them sometimes, but this one's from that.
The one I see, I had that too when I lent it out to a friend, and they said they gave it back.
Yeah.
But I don't remember getting it back.
No, because once you get this book and you've never seen it before, you're like, oh, Ken won't remember.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
just going to hang on to this.
And then, of course, I do remember, and I'm like, hey, did I get it? Oh, no, I gave it back to you.
Yeah.
But I have this thing, too, that anytime I see this out at like a book fair or something random, I'm like, oh, shit. So I grab it.
Yeah.
So I have 4 copies of the original.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, then I have, I recently got another one that came with all 3 books in one package, which I thought was this treasury.
Yeah.
But it's not, and it's not the original cover artwork. Yeah. It's this re-released one.
Okay.
So it's not the tattoo I have with the Skull Pipe Man.
Right. Wait, did you say you have a Scary Stories tattoo, Ken?
I do. I do have a Scary Stories tattoo. It's on my shoulder, and it's Skull Pipe Man coming out of the ground, the original first cover. And
dedication, folks.
Yeah,
dedication.
That's right. It's true. The new cover of the first one's it's in the second chapter. The guy looks kind of like a scarecrow with a weird hat.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There he is. It's that. Yeah, that one.
Pointing to the copy I have that we're going to be reading from.
Yes, exactly. So, and then one last thing. Our name, Other Dangerous Podcast. Yes.
Comes from one of the titles of one of the chapters from the edition. We kind of had to go that route because, when me and Ken became friends, I think one of the first things we probably talked about was scary stories. So 100%. It was and not just general scary stories. Scary stories to tell in the dark. So it was well, we got to reference something. So
yeah, it was funny. We were coming up with ideas. Me and him we were Zoom chatting or whatever, and we were all right, we're planning to meet up and talk about starting the podcast. And we were both sitting there what's that one chapter? And me and him both broke out our copies of the book and we're rifling through them in our living rooms.
Yep.
And
we both looked at each other like nerds. Other dangers. Yeah. It's what it is.
It is. Yeah. We're cool. Fuck you.
Yeah. Whatever. All right. So we're both gonna pick our 3 favorites, which we already have, and we're going to read them to you, and then a little discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
It's mid to late September right now. We're this coming Wednesday is the first day of autumn, so we're right on the precipice. So this is this is the ritual to open up the season.
Absolutely. Ushering in the king of all seasons.
Yeah, so you'll be listening to this, either probably right before the first day of fall. So all right, so first up, pick from me. is from the first book. It's called Cold as Clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the country. Soon after she left, Jim got sick, and he wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart, as you do. Yep. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death, he could not tell his daughter what happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon he complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why, you're as cold as clay," she said. "I hope you're not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone, and so was the horse. They went to the stable to look for them. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear. But there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then quickly he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around his head, they found the girl's handkerchief.
Even now.
Yeah.
Just get flushed with the,
Emotions.
And you know what? As a kid reading that, I only had references of places I'd been to,
Yeah.
So I pictured it because, like, my grandparents and dad lived in Northeast Philly.
Okay.
My mom lived in Bensalem, where we lived with her, and then my other grandparents lived in like the Trevose area.
Right.
And it was more hilly, and there was like open lands. So I pictured them taking the trek through like Trevose to my grandmom's house and showing up at the door, and like even when I drive in that area, sometimes I picture Jim on the horse.
Yeah.
Riding her with the handkerchief, and oh my God, I got this fucking nerd smile on my face right now from how much I love this story.
No, it's a great one, and I grew up in the country, so like back then there were still horse farms on the street that I grew up on,
right,
and out in the Pine Barrens. But there was like this old field with like this fence must have been put up probably in like the 30s,
right?
Like it was, and there was this one horse that used to be in this one field, and it was like there, and I think it probably was there till it just died.
Yeah,
and like I just remember that horse because I was just like, okay, because it's funny because you have this tale and the tale that you're about to read. I imagine the same field because it has the same kind of setup, and
right.
It just very much the pictures in these books very much inform the your whole like outlook on the stories.
Yeah. So this next one is it drew a great ire from one of my brothers towards me. I pulled a prank that I'll get to after this story, but
go for it.
This story is called The Thing. Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together. On this particular night, they were sitting on a fence near a post office talking about one thing or another. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly they saw something crawl out of the field and stand up. It looked like a man, but in the dark, it was hard to tell for sure. Then it was gone. But soon it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road, then it turned around and went back into the field.
Yeah, something about that.
Yeah. Then it came out a third time and started toward them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared, and they started running. But when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish. They weren't sure what had scared them so much, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Pretty soon they saw it, for it was coming to meet them. It was wearing black pants, a white shirt, and black suspenders. Sam said, "I'm going to try to touch it, then we'll know if it's real."
Bad idea.
He walked up to it and peered into its face. It had bright, penetrating eyes sunk deep in its head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed, and again, Sam ran, but this time the skeleton followed them. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in the doorway and watched it. It stayed out in the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Toward the end, Sam sat up with him every night. The night Ted died, Sam said he looked just like the skeleton.
Prophetic visions of death.
Oh, God, man. Oh.
It's a great one.
Like, the picture, if you guys, if you haven't, Google it right fucking now. Even, like, before, if you hear the thing and go back and re-listen to the story with that picture in front of you, my brother Eric, I took a picture of it and put it on his computer one time. He ripped the page right out of the book. So, thanks, Eric. But, yeah, no, that story was just, it stayed with me, it stayed with me for my whole life till now, and it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, why did it come out and go back? I mean, it crawled at first, right? So it
crawls out of the field. Yep. Stands up, and then stands there, right? And then goes back in. So then comes out again, walks halfway across the road. So I imagine like double yellow line, very, very faded on very old asphalt.
Yeah.
Under like a maybe very old
like
yellow
one
orange
straight
bulb.
Down.
Yeah. And it just stands there. So it's like the looming specter of death, right? Like they're talking about stuff, talking about whatever, but like
one thing or
every
another.
once in a while you look over, like, oh, death's always there, right?
Yeah, it's
and always
closer.
getting closer.
Yeah.
So it's.
And then when you get too curious, what was I scared of running from death? Let me go back and touch it, and it's like, well,
that's it.
Play with fire, you get burned, man.
Yep, it's just one of those stories, man. That it's like.
But it leads you to think of so many things. Like, what is it like? Because it's wearing black pants, a white shirt, and suspenders.
Yeah.
And the bright peering eyes with sunken in its head. Just
Yeah. No, it was him.
Yeah.
It was it was him. A prophecy of doom. One of the better ones, and it's great because what's great about these, scary stories to tell in the dark, and they really are, because it's like these are short, to the point, and they pack a wallop. But then look at us, we're sitting here how many years later talking about stories that are a couple paragraphs long.
And these are ones that you could still break out, like, and you can pull them from memory, and like that's why it's so good, because it's like the folklore of it. Because if you could just pull it from memory, and you can change some details up, as long as you hit with the same things, and like if you're at like a campfire, or even out back at a bonfire,
or in Treehouse,
or in Treehouse at a after an Eagles game. And you got a couple high lives in you, and tea lights, and you start telling these stories.
Stop.
All right. But they're great to pull from memory.
No, they're awesome. So good. All right, so my next pick. Before I read it, I just want to say this one has the picture that scared me the most. This is called The Haunted House. Read it, and then we'll talk about this gem of an illustration. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house. Went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar. Walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and then got choked off. Ugh. Then there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and then finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went about mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step, step, step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly, step, step, closer and closer, step, step, and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in the eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing out. She told how her lover had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and to lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, if you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church. The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and then was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at the bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him on to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to the old house at midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth, and it never did come out. Okay, let's talk about this illustration first. This illustration, you probably know it. It's the one that kind of looks like Shelley Duvall without eyes. Right? Sorry, Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, if you're listening.
She's not. She's busy.
Yeah.
This image, all right, so first of all, the first time I ever read this was in the middle of class when I was supposed to be paying attention, which is what I usually did.
Yeah.
I was in Catholic school, so it had the whole Bible thing going on, and I was sitting there, and after I read this and looking at the picture, I was sitting there, like, terrified. I was like, what the fuck? Because the whole thing of her coming up the stairs and then, like, her, like, just fading away, and then, like, the way that they described, like, you know, her features, and you don't really have to, like, guess, but then, like, the whole that there's, like, a blue light in the back of her sockets, and, like, her, like, coming right toward him and grabbing his coat, like,
yeah,
it's fucking horrifying. And it's like you just turn the page, and as they're saying that part, like, she comes towards him, and boom, and then there's the picture. You're just like, what the
you're like, no.
Yeah, this is like one of those pictures, man, that it's like I had like the you know I had the chance to actually see someone actually see this for the first time, because I passed this on to my kids and I let them read. Not my youngest yet, because some of these might be too much for her. But I remember showing it to them for the first time. I'm like, read this one, read The Haunted House. And I remember looking at their faces when they turned the page, and they were just like, ugh. It's like one of those things, like when you show someone like an image, and it only happens very, very rarely, but like when you see the image, like it's almost like the blood leaves your face a little bit. It's like, ugh. And you can't take your eyes off it. You're like, oh my God. And then like, it's just so good.
My grandpa used to hold the book open and chase us around with that picture open. God bless his soul. And
he knew how to have a good time.
He did. And but the weird thing is, my neighbor next door, the house my buddy Tom ended up moving into. It was an old couple, George and I forget the wife's name, but they had an older son that lived in the basement. They always said there was like a lady of a ghost that lived in the closet in the basement, and I always put that face.
Sure.
And I used to go hang out because he had ferrets, so I'd go over and play with the ferrets, and I would look at the closet.
Yeah.
And be like, that bitch is in there.
Oh, she totally was.
Oh, she was. Yeah. She totally was.
Yeah, so that's the haunted house. I think that's an image that always comes up. But she wasn't in that
She was.
Was she?
Yeah, they mixed her up with the big toe.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So stupid.
Yeah, that's
we'll
right.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
All right.
Save the bashing for the very end, because I got a bone to pick. All right, so my next one was one that started to stand out for me with the books on tape because of the telling.
Right.
Like I always liked it, but like it really, the way fucking our boy George fucking read it, I was like,
right.
And that like cheesy 80s like music in the background. But and this also kind of built my love for maritime, ghost stories.
Sure.
All right. This one's called, it's from book 2. It's called Somebody Fell from Aloft. I had signed on as an ordinary seaman on the Falls of Ettrick, a merchant ship bound for England. The first time I saw that ship, I knew her right away. She was the old Gertrude Spurshoe. I had sailed on her years before when she was painted brown and gold. Now she was painted black and had a new name, but it was the same ship for sure. We had a pretty good crew for the voyage, except for one hard-looking ticket named McLaurin. Oh man, he was a pretty good seaman, but there was something about him that I didn't trust. He was kind of secretive, kept mostly to himself. One day someone told him that I had worked on the Gertrude. For some reason, he got all a tremble over that. Then I catched him giving me all these ugly black looks, as if he was itching to knife me in the back. I guessed it had something to do with the old Gertrude, but I didn't know what. Well, this one day, we was trying to work our way through a dripping black fog. You'd scarcely know we had all the lights on, and it was a dead calm. There wasn't a breath of fresh air. The ship just lay there wallowing in a tuff and a rolling, going nowheres. I was standing my watch around midships, and McLaurin was doing his trick at the wheel. The rest of the crew was scattered around one place or another. It was as quiet as it could be. Then all at once, whacko! This thing hits the deck right in front of McLaurin. He lets out a screech that turns my blood cold, and he falls down in a faint. The second mate starts yelling that somebody was falling from aloft. Laying out there just forward of the wheel was someone or something dressed in an oilskins with blood oozing out of it underneath. The captain ran and fetched a big light from his cabin so we could all see who it was. They kind of straightened him out to get a good look at his face. He was a big, ugly-looking devil, but no one knew who he was or what he was doing up there. At least no one was saying. When McLaurin came to from his faint, they tried to get something out of him. All he did was jabber away, keep rolling those big eyes, wild-looking eyes of his. Everybody was getting more and more excited. We all wanted to heave the body overboard as quick as we could, but there was something weird about it, as if it wasn't real. But the captain wasn't so sure about getting rid of it right away. Could it be a stowaway, he asked? But that ship was so filled with lumber we were carrying, there was no space where a living thing could hide from 3 weeks, which was how long we'd been out. Even if it was a stowaway, what was he doing on a loft on such a dirty day? There was no reason for anyone to be up there. There was nothing to see. Finally, the captain gave up and told us to heave him overboard. Then nobody would touch him. The mate ordered us to pick him up, but nobody made a move. Then he tried coaxing, but that didn't do any good. Suddenly, that loomy McLaurin starts yelling, "I handled him once before, and I can handle him again!" He picks up the body and staggers over to the railing with it. He is just about to throw it overboard when it wraps his 2 big long arms around him, and over they both go together. Then on the way down, one of them starts laughing in a horrible way. The mates are yelling to launch a boat, but no one would get on the boat, not on a night like that. We threw a couple life preservers after them, but everybody knew they weren't going to help. So that was that, or was it? The first chance I had to go home after that, I went right over to see old Captain Spurshoe, who was the captain of the Gertrude. Well, he says, one trip these 2 outlandish men shipped aboard the Gertrude. One was McLaurin, the other was this really big fella. The big one was always picking on McLaurin and thumping him around, and McLaurin was always talking about how one day he would get back at him. Well, this wet, dirty night, the 2 of the men was up there alone, and the big one come flying down. Killed himself, dead her in a hair. McLaurin says the foot rope they were on used parted, and he almost fell himself, but everyone who saw the rope knew she didn't give away on her own, that she'd been cut through with a knife. After that, whenever we get into a port, McLaurin thought we were going to get the police after him, and he'd get pretty scared, but we couldn't prove anything, so we didn't even try. In the end, I guess the big fella took care of things in his own way. If he was a ghost that came back, that's what he was. If there be things such as ghosts. Ooh. Ah, yeah, man. Like, I love the description of, like, you know, like it was this oil sex and, like, the blood oozing out. And McLaurin, when he wakes up, he's like, fucking, you know, get that fucking thing off of here. No one will do it.
You gotta love the madness from the sea type stories, too. Because it's always like, you feel like that kind of stuff is always looming because, like, they're stuck on the boat for so long. They probably just can't wait to get where the hell they're going. And, like, and, you know, sailors being overly superstitious.
Right. So. And then, like, when something actually happens, you know, like, the whole boat the ship becomes astir, and it's like, man, the old, you know, sea yarns, you know, those are.
Yep. And they all lose their shit, and they're all running back and forth through, like, different closed and open doors, like those Scooby-Doo fucking sections.
Oh, man. Just like sea tales and just being out to sea, and, like, I just wish, I wish I could have lived on a pirate ship for a little bit of time and seen what that was all about, you know?
Like, yeah, but at the same time, no, because, like, you know, you cut your finger and it gets infected.
Yeah,
You're fucked.
You get the scurvy out there, and
scurvy.
all you could do is, you know, drink rum because the water couldn't, you know, last.
Yeah. Oh, good pick.
Thank you.
All right, so for my next pick, this one I saved for the last because I read this on a Boy Scout camping trip. Me and 2 other kids, you know, were in the same tent, and, like, you know, this is like middle of the woods, and, you know, these books were, you know, these were like our Bible at that point. Everyone had them, and I hadn't read this one yet, and there was no collected edition yet. I didn't have the 3rd volume yet, and the one kid, I think his name was Keith, and he was like, "Hey, I got the 3rd book." I was like, "No shit." He's like, "Dude, read this one." I was like, "Okay, which one?" He's like, "Harold." When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to a cool green pasture in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months. Then they brought them down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but oh, it was boring. All the day the 2 men tended their cows. At night they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of a man," he said. Thomas had problems.
Yeah.
"It would be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of an old sack stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and a twisted frown. Of course, they also gave it Harold's name. Each morning on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden to scare away the birds. Each night they brought him inside so he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of them might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" Then the other, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They both would laugh, but not Harold.
Yeah, nope.
Whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick him or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it on the doll's face. "How do you like that stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you'd better eat it, or else." Then the 2 men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas.
Thomas
that'll be that.
Dude, Thomas has the right idea
Yeah,
there.
he gives 0 fucks. He's a man of action.
Yeah.
"Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave them behind for now. Let's just keep an eye on them." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then the doll grunted, but that was all.
Yeah, that was it.
After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him as badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold is growing," he said. "I was thinking the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our imagination," Alfred replied. "We have been up here on the mountain maybe too long." The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and night, he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in a far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid.
Too late for that fire, I'm guessing, you know?
Whew. They decided to take the cows down into the valley that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if he had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gotten only a mile or two, they realized that they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. I say fuck those milking stools.
Right.
Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. There really is nothing to be afraid of, they told one another. After all, what could a doll do?
Yeah, right.
Well, a lot, apparently.
Yeah.
They drew straws to see which one would go back. It was Thomas. I'll catch up with you, he said, and Alfred walked on toward the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anymore, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. Dude, what the fuck is that story? First of all, they're just talking, he made a grunt. One day, Harold gets up and walks out of the fucking room.
Yeah.
First of all, anybody in that room, that's it. One would die of fright, and the other one would shit bricks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and these guys are like farmers, right? There's like cowboys. Like, why aren't they opening fire on this motherfucker?
I mean, maybe they didn't have guns, because if they were, there would have been a scene like, and then other nights when they got fucking rootin' tootin', fucking, they'd be shooting at them.
Maybe, yeah. Dude, like, well, that it's a folktale, so, like, I'm guessing that kind of is a representation of a totem, like, calling something into existence,
A tulpa.
Yeah, or tulpa,
Yeah.
like, it's
you believe it long enough, you put enough out there, you put your it's that idea that, like, if you think on it enough, it can become real. That's what a tulpa is, apparently. Yeah. So
you mean that might not be real?
I mean, it's an interesting concept, and if it's true, then where are all the Marvel superheroes? We think about them all the time.
Well,
how long did it take for me to do a Marvel reference?
Hey, you're good. This was actually
a good one, right?
You took a while here this time.
The story scared the shit out of me when I read it that night, because it was like, first of all, it's just a doll, then it grunts, then it gets up and it's trotting back and forth on the roof of this little hut that they have.
And, like, what does it do? Like, why is that its first course of action? It's just like, so I'm fed up with these motherfuckers. Yeah. And he's just stomping back and forth. Like, how do you like noise?
Yeah. So it's almost like he kind of become like their, like, sort of like a weird friend in a way. Because, like, why does he get murdered? Do they know that he was being left behind? So he comes back. He's like, you were going to leave me behind. Did he even say anything, or did he just come up to him and just boom, rips his skin off?
I'm thinking he probably was just like going about his business, like that was his next like chore, because he was out in the pasture, like at the end corner of it.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is he doing? And then he disappears for a day. He's probably doing chores.
Okay.
He's probably out there, So
he's a dutiful cursed scarecrow.
Yes, absolutely.
Creature.
Absolutely. Right. The Slithery D came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat me.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So my final entry is it's a doozy, boys and girls. So I'm gonna do my best dramatic reading of this. Gonna have a sip of a Sam Adams Jacko Pumpkin Ale real quick.
Attaboy.
Gonna need the fuel here.
All right.
This is from the first book. It's entitled Meetai Doty Walker. There was a haunted house where every night a bloody head fell down the chimney. At least that's what people said. So no one would stay there overnight. Then, a rich man offered $200 to whoever would do it. And this boy said he would try if he could have his dog with him. So it was all settled. The very next night, the boy went up to the house with his dog. To make it more cheerful, he started a fire in the fireplace. Then he sat in front of the fire and waited, and his dog waited with him. For a while, nothing happened, but a little after midnight, he heard someone singing softly and sadly in the woods. The singing sounded something like this. Meetai Doty Walker. It's just somebody singing, the boy told himself, but he was frightened. Then his dog answered the song. Softly and sadly it sang. Linchi, kinchi, kali, mali, dingo, dingo. The boy could not believe his ears. His dog had never uttered a word before. Then, a few minutes later, he heard the singing again. Now it was closer and louder, but the words were the same. Meetai Doty Walker. This time the boy tried to stop his dog from answering, He was afraid that whoever was singing would hear it and come after them. But his dog paid no attention, and it sang again. Linchi, kinchi, kali, mali, dingo, dingo. A half hour later, the boy heard the singing again. Nell was in the backyard, and the song was the same. Me tie Dodie Walker. Again, the boy tried to keep his dog quiet, but the dog sang louder, and it was louder than ever. Lynchy, kinchy, kali, mali, dingo, dingo. Soon the boy heard the singing again. Nell was coming down the chimney. Me tie Dodie Walker. The dog sang right back. Lynchy, kinchy, kali, mali, dingo, dingo. Suddenly, a bloody head fell down the chimney. It missed a fire. It landed right next to the dog. The dog took him a look and fell over dead from fright. The head turned and stared at the boy and slowly opened its mouth and...
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I gave myself the chills there.
Yeah.
That was... Woo.
Wait. Chills?
If you like my telling of that story, leave a message in the comments.
Smash that like button if that reading just got your nips hard.
How's it going, buddy? No, I'm sorry.
Good job, buddy.
Thanks, man. I had fun doing that, man.
Yeah.
That was a good time. And, fuck. You know, those jump scares at the beginning, like with like the, you know, the, you got it, you know, those, man. Mm-hmm. Whew. You pull those off, man. You're getting someone squeezing out, you know, little Duke. Yeah. Little Duke's happening there, man.
Little Tootsie Rolls in their undies.
It's always been a dream of mine to read that on my very own podcast.
Well, now it's all done. Woo. Thank you, folks. We had a good time. Other Dangerous Podcast, done.
Yeah. We made it to 34. It's over, guys.
Dan Aykroyd said, fuck off.
Yeah, right. Oh, man.
So I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention the... Look, I don't care what anyone thinks. The film adaptation of this is horrendous.
Terrible.
They missed... Like, okay... I'm not just going to come out with like my version, what I would have done, but I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So
good, please.
I think they should have taken. Okay, so they have the book, right? You have the book of these stories, and then they should have read the stories, and then when they were reading the stories, it should have cut to an animation segment, and the animation should have all been in the style of Gamble stuff.
Yeah. Right.
In this one, it's like, it's just Goosebumps.
Yeah.
The movie Goosebumps, which is a better film.
Yeah, right. And the problem is, too, it's like the license the writers took, because this was the same guy who, the same writer of, I think, what did they do? They did a couple other things. It was a father-son team. But the director was the guy who did The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Okay.
Which was a fucking awesome movie.
Yeah.
And when you see the visuals in that, I was like, oh, this might actually turn out good. But my idea of what they did...
Yeah.
How the screenplay was written.
Yeah.
So they took a blank notepad and they took turns shitting in their hand and throwing it at this notepad, right?
I heard that.
Yeah. And then they took that and they sent it off to CBS Films. Yeah. And they were like, gold, print it, we're going.
The problem with it also is like
Guillermo del Toro.
I don't want to start talking about him because what's that guy from Mush, everything he turned up his hands on.
The Mush.
Yeah. The dude might have an Oscar, but like,
yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, so does Halle Berry. You know? No.
And Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I just think that they missed the point of it's not the stories that made these so powerful, it's the images.
Yeah.
So if you kept the real world stuff as real world people reading these stories, but then when it was time for the stories, if you took this, you know, the illustrations and extrapolated from that entire animated segments, I really think that would have worked a lot better, and it would have had more reverence for the artwork and the illustrations, because that's what made this book, or these images. Like, that is a scary book for everybody.
Yeah.
Kids that can't read are scared of that book.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
well,
so
in the same breath, any other way they could have done the movie would have almost been better.
Any other way.
Even if like they just did the stories out without a connecting theme, would have been better.
But it's like they were stuck in that thing of like, well, there has to be this anthology thing that's going on now, because it's almost like everything has to be, you know, connected, and like, you know, oh well, this exists in the Scary Stories universe.
Yeah.
Like, it's like so and that would personally, that's what I would have done to fix it, because that's what this is. That's what makes these great, are these illustrations. And if you had these kids, like, you could have even gone like what's it called? Oh God, killing me here. The Snick show.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Are You Afraid of the Dark? That's
yeah.
why I can't believe I forgot
Yeah,
that.
it's fine.
I was just looking at it.
Yeah.
If they went that style,
Yeah.
kids sitting around a campfire,
Telling
or
the
kids
stories,
are
yeah.
telling the stories to each other, trying to scare each other.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to, at the end, they're walking home, and then here's the monsters.
Yeah.
Fade, and then
Yeah.
cut to black.
Right.
That could have been cool.
It would have been cool.
But just
And then the book's writing itself. Like it was like, what the fuck are you doing?
I found it behind the wall.
Yeah. There's a girl in a basement. Like that was so Guillermo del Toro. Like there needs to be a scary girl in a basement.
Yeah, and then there needs to be a scene where you're standing still and the monster keeps getting closer and then closer. It's like that's not even that. Like that's I don't know, man. It just.
Look, and
The execution is very poor, and all they did was just take elements from it and put it onto a pre-existing
script story already.
Yes,
yeah.
and they just plugged in the features from this, and here's your movie.
And what's so telling about that too is the one story when they did the meet Tony Walker part, and the head falls down the chimney.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the body, they call it the Gangly Man, which is obviously a take on Aaron Kelly's Bones.
Yeah, but they don't call him that.
Yeah,
in the book.
they don't call him that. They don't call him the Gangly Man. They call it's Aaron Kelly.
Yeah.
And then they mixed those kind of two stories up, and then they mixed up what we were saying earlier, the haunted house and the big toe.
Yeah.
So the big toe with the missing toe is the girl from the haunted house, and they told the stories wrong, and I don't know. It was such a mishmash of bullshit that if I see Guillermo del Toro, I'll be like, yo, Hellboy was cool. This is for scary stories, and give him one.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
fair.
Sorry.
Don't apologize to me.
No.
Yeah.
Well.
And there's that. So.
Oh, and here's for Crimson Peak. Yeah.
Christina loves that movie.
Oh man.
I don't know. You'd have to ask her.
Yeah.
So apparently there's a sequel coming out. Please don't.
Scary stories that tell in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That was me flushing a toilet.
But the crazy thing is, these are legendary, and the last one came out, which was 91, and the thing is that always held it up. I mean, Alvin Schwartz passed years ago, but Stephen Gammell, I think he still does work here and there. He's old, but he's like a hermit. He does not give interviews.
Right.
He does not, doesn't do much work anymore. But if you want to continue, the flavor of scary stories to tell in the dark, look up Stephen Gammell, because he has quite a few other books, and the illustrations are just as good. But it's an entire book of there's a children's book. It's about Thanksgiving poems. It is horrific.
What was the one too? It was called Mama, and it was about this kid who had this adopted mother, and she was like a troll kind of creature, but she wasn't. It was
I haven't seen that one in a long time. But then there's another one. He has one. It's it's an allegorical story of the Holocaust. It's deep. You can get it. I forget what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But I have it somewhere. And then he did a book. There's a book that came out also in the early '80s. It's a book about werewolves, and he does all the illustrations. I'll find it.
Yeah, please. I need to see that.
And then he also has a few others. There's a book, Halloween Poems. I'll show you that. I got in there.
Okay.
Just great stuff from top to bottom. And I wish, I mean, he's elderly now, so I don't think he's going to be like, hey guys, guess what? Part 4. I don't think that's going to happen. But, these are to the people that these books matter to, which obviously the two of us this is the book. This book made me want to do art. You know what I mean? This is what I was like, okay, this has a quality that would be amazing to try to put forth through your own work or something. You know what I mean? It's this has substance, and it's just images. And
man. And any time that I've done the short stories for you, or because I'm writing some. Surprise everyone out there that listens to our show. I've been slowly working on a compilation of short stories that I've been working on. Some with my wife, some alone, and Jay's used some for his Partial of Terror, his Halloween editions every year. I've kind of channel these in a way of what I felt like when I read these as a kid.
Yeah, man.
So anytime I type those up, I try to go back to that put my set in that headspace and I always end up using areas I remember where I was at when I was reading them, or
right.
And I tell the story from my friends' names and stuff, and it's just man. These you nailed it when you said to people that these books matter to.
Yeah,
and it's just they are such a staple.
Yeah,
in just my life.
Sure. I mean, there's plenty of people that are like, yeah, I read it. It's whatever, and it's like, okay, but to the people that you're not half in on these. You either love these books or you're just like whatever.
Right.
But most of the time you bring it up. It's like, you ever read this? And then everyone's like, oh, scary story. Oh, yeah. You know, it's like, have you seen the movie? Yeah, don't see the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the one when I was getting my tattoo, the one tattoo artist was like to the other one, he's like, hey, can you bring me that thing in the printer? It's like a clown skeleton with a pipe. So the guy that goes to get the picture to my tattoo artist, he's like, oh shit, I remember these books. Like, he was like, oh man, he's like, I forget the name, but they scared the shit out of me.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
And that's what's great about them, because like you know, if you were a monster kid growing up, you know, or you were just someone that was into scary stories and shit, you definitely came across this kind of stuff. And like, God, the stuff I put into my brain as a child, scaring myself with these books, then putting on sightings and Tim White scaring the shit out of me, fucking haunted houses.
That's why we're so close, bro.
That's what it is, bro.
Yeah, bro.
Oh, is there anything else there, Ken? What do you think?
Yeah, man. I think we did it. We did it justice, and you know, we talked about it. Fuck the movie, you know.
Yeah. Hey, you brought it home with that reading, my friend.
Yeah, I wanted to do my best job at making it a lunatic story.
Well, I hope everyone who listens to this, you know, I hope this helps, you know, bring in your the fall season for you. I mean, I know, you know, now everyone loves to start Halloween on August 1st, which I just can't do. It's too hot. I can't sweat and think about Halloween. So hopefully this starts to bring it in for you. You know, light a nice pumpkin candle, or right now I've got the marshmallow campfire one going right now. We got a pumpkin one going out in the other room. Yeah, you just got to set that proper mood. You know, maybe listen to the episode, and hey, go back to the books, man.
Yeah, like, dude, look at the books when we're going through this episode. Some honorable mentions: Clinkety Clink, The Bad News. There's some great ones in there, man. The Black Dog. The alligators.
Oh yeah. The one that got the
father and the kids.
Yes. Room for One More.
Oh, Room for One More, dude. Oh man, the Viper, the Babysitter. Dude, like, we could name them all. Like, they're all good.
High Beams.
The
Wedding Gown.
The Bride.
Yep.
Oh man.
The Walk.
The
Guests. The one where the people show up and they stay at the house, and then they come back the next day and like the house is burned down.
Yeah, and what's the church one? It's Sunday morning. What's the one where the girl hears the church bells and she goes to church way too early?
Oh yeah.
And then it's the dead church and they chase her out of there.
I forget what that one's called, but yeah.
God, I think it's called Sunday Morning.
Okay, yeah.
Oh man, and then there's Wait Till Martin Comes.
And the songs.
Oh, all the songs, dude.
Yeah,
the Her song.
The worms come out. The worms play pinochle on your snap.
Pinochle, as George says it. But yeah, there's so much in there, guys. Do yourself a favor. Dive into these books. You can find them online too. Yeah, the big toe. And Clinkety. You want another lunatic reading? Clinkety Clink is the most lunatic reading on the audiobooks.
If you folks haven't heard these, they're all on YouTube. So if you just look up Scary Stories audiobook or Scary Stories like book on tape, it'll come up. And like, I think there's a few that are just the compilation of like all three books. Yeah. So it's a good time.
Yeah. I think we touched all the bases here. And I guess my closing statement is going to be the Slithery D came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat Slurp.
I like it. Yeah. That's my closing statement, too.
Yeah, all right. All right, guys, for this episode of Other Dangerous Podcast, I'm Ken James.
And I'm Jason McKittrick.
And as always, have a spooky evening. Thank you for listening to Other Dangerous Podcasts. Have you encountered the other dangers? If so, you can email us at otherdangerouspodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to have a discussion about the paranormal, you can find us at Other Dangerous Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. There you can find submitted pictures, videos, and artwork from listeners. We are now streaming on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else podcasts are streamed. And after listening, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you the other dangers.